good to see almost a full house. I'm sure people will be coming in later as well. And so glad to have the esteemed panel of speakers here today to talk about hidden pillars, about micro enterprises, especially focusing on women. All of you know about Karya, and it's one of India's largest convening platforms for livelihoods. The fact that why we are talking about hidden pillars today is to look at, and also hear from our panelists here, is to look at certain infrastructure challenges, systemic issues that persist when we talk about micro enterprises from marginalized communities and run by women specifically. The idea is that while some of these pillars, as we all know about them, but the fact that there is lack of data, accurate data if I can say accurately, that hinders a lot of policymakers to frame policies which can help these hidden pillars come to the forefront. This can be anything right from formal market linkages, peer support, learning groups, and of course, being a woman, you also need certain spaces where you can, have support from your peers as well. This panel will also look at what kind of solutions we can look at, and as towards the end of the panel, we'll also have questions. So I'll urge you to ask questions because we have a great line of speakers today. Since I was talking about data accuracy and more so in terms of availability of accurate data, I would like to move to my first speaker, Anmol. So Anmol, how does Karya's M&E platform measure the impact of ethical digital work on women's economic resilience, focusing on women entrepreneurs basically?
Thanks so much for having me here. It's truly an honor to be a part of such an esteemed panel and such a lovely audience. I'm Anmol. I lead monitoring and evaluation at Karya. Maybe I'll tell you a little bit about what Karya does. Karya is an impact-focused organization that essentially works at the intersection of low-income, vulnerable communities that are in need of digital, flexible, dignified work, as well as companies that are creating big tech AI models. We also come in at the intersection of these workers and spaces where the market does not typically step in. So things like what does gender bias look like in AI. So we are cognizant of the fact that the AI wave is inevitable, but how can we include low-income rural communities in that process and pay them fairly for this kind of work that they're doing? Our primary intervention is a mobile application. It's called Karya, and we work with these communities who do this kind of digital work on our mobile app, and they get paid commensurate to the work that they have done. Now, this is a significant value addition for the workers that we have, especially women. So far, we've worked with 130,000 workers across the country, all states and UTs, and 60% of those workers are women. And these are women that typically would either be students in college studying, or they are homemakers, they're sitting inside their households, and they need that additional supplementary income that Karya can provide to them. So that's the overall context within which Karya operates. Now, there are a few terms with regards to your question that we can potentially unpack. The first is, how do we reach low-income or low-resource communities? And that's a really interesting question for us because we want to be able to target the most vulnerable. So the first is that we do surveys. Because our platform is a mobile application, it's relatively easier for us to collect data from our communities based on their consent. So we roll out surveys in order to ascertain the socio-economic context within which our workers operate. These we roll out on a quarterly basis. And we try to gauge these contexts not just through unilateral questions around income, which of course is important, but we try to supplement that through multiple different sources, and we're inspired by the multidimensional poverty index. So we're trying to look at multiple pillars of what socioeconomic well-being can look like. Of course, a survey in itself is not enough, and these are typically digital tasks that go to these workers and we compensate them for it on the mobile app. In order to supplement this kind of data, we also go to the field. engage with these communities, understand what their lived realities are, what is their experience of doing this kind of digital work with us, what are the barriers that they're facing. Typically through FGDs or BIS, we're able to engage with them. And in that process, they also feel seen and heard. And the third layer that we add to it is a layer of triangulation, because we have a lot of these questions around socioeconomic well-being. So we look at unit level data that is released by the government, and we created something we call an income validation index to be able to triangulate at the district level what is the level of vulnerability using the National Family Health Survey, the Climate Vulnerability Assessment Index, and multiple other data sources. Another thing that we're thinking about is a vulnerability index. So we're trying to, since we're collecting all of this data on our mobile application, can we look at all of this self-reported data, identify what are the bands of vulnerability within which our workers operate, and can we route them to more relevant pipelines of work that they're able to do. I think that's first. The second was digital confidence in your question. And this is also a really intriguing question in the context of digital work. What does mental well-being, psychosocial well-being, and confidence look like? So since we have all these 130K workers, they're all operating at different levels of digital literacy, which is what becomes really interesting when we look at the types of tasks that they're able to do. So digital work is not one band, there are different levels or layers of work that one can do. And it's really important for us to ensure that our workers do not get stuck in a loop of low-paying, low-complexity work, which is why we want to be able to upskill them in the process of going from low digital literacy to high levels of digital literacy as well. In that process, we're also rolling out surveys about what is the emotion that you associate with working with us. Do you feel safe with the kind of work that you're doing with us? So these are just the building blocks of how we envision measuring digital confidence as well as impact with our communities. But the biggest underlying factor to enable both of these concepts is dignity when it comes to digital work. And there are several tenets to this. I think the first is transparency about what is the type of work that is coming their way, how much they're going to get paid for doing this kind of work. Second is safety. Especially in the context of digital work, it's important to identify what is the type of work that is coming in, what is the type of work that we want to say no to, with our workers. And of course, we're also ascertaining their mental well-being in the process. And if they need priority support, we route it to them. And the third is worker voice, which is that they must feel like they're a part of building for AI. So similar to, and most of you may have seen Humans in the Loop, but it's about helping them feel like they're building for AI. And these are all in regional, local languages, which is why they feel like they're contributing to a larger movement. Of course, embedding support systems for them. So we have a chatbot, which averages 600 conversations a day, which is based on a WhatsApp UI, where we are engaging with our workers as well, of course, apart from engaging with them in the field itself. And that link to upskilling would be, the creation of an ecosystem where we're able to positively measure the impact that we're having on their lives. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you so much, Anmol, for that. We hardly associate, words like dignity, confidence when it comes to digital platforms. So that's very interesting to hear. So since we're talking about well-being, I'll move to Reinu for the second question, which is why are informal support systems such as childcare, shared workspaces often overlooked in policy frameworks, and how can you cluster development programs help recognize and strengthen this critical yet invisible and hidden pillars?
Good morning, everyone. It's really a delight to be here, and I feel really honored to be here on this panel. Thank you for asking me that question. And I was just hoping that the question that comes to women empowerment is mostly somehow tied to the funding, right? Whether they're entrepreneurs, especially when they're entrepreneurs. So I thought my question would follow that, and I would take the lead from there. However, what I do want to say is that just here in this room, I want you all to visualize a couple of things. And let's start with the first one. which is just visualize a person working in the fields with a child tied on the back. And the second visualization I want you all to do is to just visualize a person early morning packing tiffins for the children and for the couple, and before the person rushes to the metro station to get to work in time. And third, we are in Delhi. It's smoggy, it's cold, it's going to get colder, it's going to be dark, and coming back from work on a late evening, which is going to be very dark, and walking towards the bus stop or the metro station, and worrying about not being groped, not any other safety issues, all of these things. So my question is that when you visualize all of this, who do you see, a man or a woman?
Obviously.
Yes, obviously a woman, right? And these are the hidden agenda or the hidden supports that we are talking about today. And that is for me, that is the question that I'm here to answer. So it's really, really important to see this through some examples. And I'll give you examples from my own work. And there was a project that we were doing with a large logistic company, and we were trying to place women. Now it is not just about entrepreneurship, but women in workforce. And when we went there and we dug deeper, and we realized that there weren't enough facilities for women. There were not enough toilets, there wasn't a creche, and men and women both had to work in shifts, and which is fair. And there was a transport, also fair. The transport dropped them to bus stops, and from there they had to take either local transport autos, or they had to walk to get to their places. Now this last mile was missing. So I asked the company people, and I said, why isn't there enough infrastructure? And they gave a very solid reply, and they said, we don't have enough women. And I went back to the women and I said that, why aren't you working there? And they said, because there is not enough infrastructure. So this is a vicious circle that we get into, and who is going to break it? And I leave for you to think about that. And I'm going to give you a very different example from the rural work that we do. Recently we were doing trainings. We've launched India's first reality-based pitch series for women rural entrepreneurs. It is called Dhanotsav. So while doing the trainings for Dhanotsav, we had chosen a group of 200 women, and they were undergoing the training. And there was one woman, her name was Meena, and she's about 25 years old, and her husband was very excited that she attends the trainings and do something. Now, what really happened was, and Meena herself was very excited. She came for the first day of the training, and then she didn't. And it wasn't because Meena didn't want to come, but she was worried that she was going to get on that bumpy auto and get to the training center, which wasn't working for her pregnancy in any ways. And during pregnancy, there is physical pressure on the body, and she needed to use the toilets frequently. She didn't have access to them. And we didn't see Meena again. So, and then the third example I want to give you, and I want to give you these really real examples, when we see data, and sometimes we forget that there are real people behind this data, and there are these stories. And for Dhanotsav, we had a training launch in September. One of our participants from village Bojla in district Jhansi, her name is Prabha, and she could not make it. And the reason was simple, there was nobody to take care of her children. So, this is what the problem is. And I can talk about policy and why it is not there in policy. If you allow me time, I can continue.
So maybe we can just have one example of how policy frameworks are not there, and maybe I'll come to the second question where you can talk more about what could be a probable solution for that.
Okay, so I'll just take that why policy frameworks are not that, and that is really close to my heart. So I was trying to speak. Thank you. So policy frameworks are not there for 2 or 3 typical reasons. The first reason is policy looks at stuff that can be measured. How many people have signed up? What is the amount of loan given? What is the utilization of that loan? What is the income? Those are the things, because these are really measurable things. How do you measure the impact of childcare, of a clean toilet? I don't know. neither the people who are designing the policy. And that brings me to the second point, is pregnancy, childcare, taking care of aged parents, safety, clean toilets. These are kind of lived realities. And I'm sure these are lived realities of a lot of people in this room. So when I talk about policy, I'm talking about design of the policy. We need equal gender representation at the table when we are designing the policy. That is when this will work. And we have some really good examples. So let me, most of you know that in Bangladesh, which is a very strong network of SHGs, there is a creche inbuilt in the design of the care infrastructure. If you go to Vietnam, if you look at the garment clusters, there is a shared workspace for safety, there is a creche childcare built into those clusters. And third, let's go to Latin America and Chile. A business center for women includes a shared workspace, access to technology, and a creche. It's that simple.
Thank you so much, Reinu, for bringing that up. I think the point that you pushed, that most of us in this room probably would have gone through these situations where lack of toilet, lack of better infrastructure, but we'll come to that later. I'm going to move to Chetna ji because we're talking about policies. So, why do informal finance systems and mechanisms like micro savings and peer networks often prove more resilient for nano enterprises than formal credit systems? Especially when there is a financial shock or there is something else which just throws people off balance when they're running a micro enterprise.
So first of all, it's a thank you. It's a great opportunity to share the experiences, and thanks Churcha, and thank you for getting me on this panel. When we were talking about the data and all, and Mandeshi is working with Mandeshi Bank and Mandeshi Foundation, both working in women entrepreneurs. When we completed 1 million women entrepreneurs, we thought, okay, why don't we look into the data where these 1 million women entrepreneurs, what is happening? And fortunately, we had a MIS made by Accenture, so we had all the data. And one very interesting thing we found was that out of these 1 million women entrepreneurs, there were 350,000 women entrepreneurs who were able to employ one more woman or two more women. So then we thought, okay, it's interesting to see what is happening with them. Now what we saw in these women entrepreneurs, number one, they didn't drop out. When they started a business with great idea, but they didn't drop out. Why? What was the reason? Because many of them dropped out also. And in data, it is very important why they drop out. And what you were saying, these reasons, you don't know what are the reasons. So then we saw that, okay, what were the reasons for other women, and some of the women entrepreneurs, they dropped out. So there are various, like access to capital, access to ecosystem, access to network, these. But one thing when we discussed with these 350,000 women who have given jobs to other women, how could they do it? You know what they said? They said that when we start business, everything starts from no in the family, which doesn't happen with men. Now when we say everything starts from no, what does it exactly mean? So one is, if you are going to start a business and if there are losses, we are not going to take the responsibility. Darwaza khulla hai to get out of the house. Whereas if men starts the business, अरे बेटा चला लो, अगर पैसा लगेगा तो हम देंगे. So that is a hidden pillar. You say that no access to capital. Second, that if you are going to start a business, as you mentioned, घर का काम खत्म करके ही जाना है, and then only you do. So, and these were the women who had crossed all these barriers. So what were the learnings? I would say that is very important. So number one learning was that access to capital was made available by various ways. Informal finance, family and friends, most of them family and friends. And then the network of women which they were being able to support. Now, I'm just saying that it is so important to recognize this nano entrepreneurship, and at G20, we got that as a definition that it's not micro, but nano entrepreneurs, women-owned business, which is very important. And what is all that support it requires? when we did it that in G20. The second thing which I would really like to share is that how it helps at a macro level. If you are able to get these nano entrepreneurs support, what happens? Number one, migration reduces. How does migration reduce? Because majority of the population is surviving on agriculture and घर का खर्चा नहीं निकल सकता है. So if women start a business and get some income, then the family, there are less chances of family going into the slums of the nearest city or nearest town. So nano entrepreneurs, if we invest, we address very big issue, that is migration. Second, the small towns or in the big towns, which migration already has happened, they don't end up in a very vulnerable situation. So if these women start a business, they bring an additional income in the family. And lastly, I would just say that this whole nano entrepreneurship brings the ownership for women, entitlements. So they have collateral. And I will end here by saying that how can you build this network? It's even organizations like Mandeshi, if we want to do, we have a bank, we have a foundation. Bank is always, they don't have collateral, so do we give loan? So how do you create a last mile population support to these nano entrepreneurs? So what Mandeshi has done is Udyam Sakhis and Bank Sakhis. Each Udyam Sakhis mentor 1200 women entrepreneurs and Bank Sakhis provide an access to capital and repayment services to these women. I will stop here, and the second part I will talk about how Reserve Bank of India, we could change their policy for women and nano entrepreneurs, which was there for SHGs, but not nano entrepreneurs. How could we change the approach of guarantee funds? That I will come in the second part of it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chetna ji. I think in terms of what you mentioned, like small things, like how Reinu also said, can make a huge amount of difference. So coming to Dr. Rajeev, and I'm going to ask you a little bit a different question, but the same context on it. So Chetna ji spoke about policy frameworks. So at your work in EDII and your experience at EDII, how do hidden supports impact the sustainability of nano enterprise? And what policy recommendations can you draw from to have greater gender inclusivity, to have more support systems for micro nano enterprises for women? So I would like to hear about that from you.
Thank you so much, Pallavi. And it's honor to be part of such fellow panelists with me. Coming to the question, it has simplified me the points that panelists have raised already earlier. Just quickly, I'll relate to the work what we do at Entrepreneurship Development Institute of India. We have been working with the state and central ministries on certain programs like ESDP, Entrepreneurship Skill Development Program, which is a major program, one of the major programs. And at the same time, we are also working with various corporates who have taken these initiatives under their CSR, where they are supporting women specifically in many of the clusters for the livelihood, one, and secondly, helping them for the enterprise creation. Though the size, what the size is, that again is very, very different, because sometimes it's a very nominal size, as we have nanos in these cases. In other cases, there are micro also. Coming to these programs have been developed on the basis of certain on-ground experiences, and Ma'am Reinu ji has rightly put forward that there are certain nuances, certain intricacies and complexities at the ground level that women are facing, which cannot be measured. But then at the same time, I think over a period of time, the programs, the policies which have incorporated and which have brought in certain programs at a national level in terms of capacity building of women, that's one. And secondly, what Chetna ji has mentioned in terms of providing capital access to the women entrepreneurs. These are the two areas where over a period of time things have evolved. Some new things have been incorporated in the policies. And lately, to develop the ecosystem at the ground level, at what should be the structure or how certain NGOs should specifically work in these categories has also been worked upon. So, but yes, at the same time, there are limitations in terms of policy. I have myself experienced what ma'am had said to say, imagine there is a village in Uttarakhand, Bajau, which is around 100-150 kilometers from there in hills. We were conducting a program for VSDP there. Young girls who are say 21, 22, they are part of the family. They work in their say agriculture also. At the same time, they are running a small shop also at their place. And at the same time, they are participating in certain such programs where they want to learn something new and they want to grow from their better present size. But yes, there are issues that how simultaneously they do because they have to divide their time. But at the same time, this is interesting thing about our country that on both sides, both extremes, things are possible or things are taking place. In some of the projects where we have worked with women, specifically in some of the south clusters and heritage clusters like Salem is there, Mahabaleshwar is there, Kamrup is there in northeast, we have come across certain cases where they started through SHG and some of them became so good entrepreneurs that their husbands have left their work and now they are assisting the women to run their enterprise. So when we say that policies are not resulting into anything, it's not that. Yes, they are evolving over a period of time. Country being diverse and hugely populated, we need to take care that all the stakeholders, all the aspects or all the sectors are involved in that. Because as in terms of data also that has been shared already, that in terms of data work also things are happening and Karya is doing very good work there. In ESDP, this is the last thing that I'm mentioning, it's from the policy perspective also what ministry wants. Most of the programs that are in entrepreneurship or skill development, over a period of time they were either in say textiles or in terms of beauticians. But as times are changing, new skills are required. One. Secondly, the duplicacy should not happen in the name of beauty and in the name of handicraft and in the name of handloom. So ministry wants, now the programs which they are running, they want that the women or say SCST or the other communities, they should be trained in something related to IT, something related to say energy. Even in a small manner, if you start with that, something in terms of that they are able to use the app so that their functioning becomes easy. So these are the areas where policies are being tweaked a little so that the women also learn, the women enterprises, they also learn about the recent changes which are happening, which are being brought into the policy. I'll stop here, we'll take it later, whatever the question arises.
Thank you so much, Dr. Rajeev. A very interesting point on how families are changing now that women have taken up work and they've done really well for themselves. So I just have 12 minutes, all of us have 12 minutes, so quick questions the second. So coming back to you, Anmol, would like to hear from you an example where localized or vernacular digital content has improved women entrepreneurs' income and their decision-making capacity.
Thanks for the question. I'll take one example and not too much time. One example we have is of baby Kai. She's creating an AI model on financial inclusion in Marathi. So the kind of work that she typically do is, after a full day's work, she would sit in her home and in the quiet, she would read out a story in Marathi based on the text that she had received. And this data actually helped train an AI model in Marathi. Now, the way that this changed her life is in a few different facets. I think the first is feeling like a part of the AI ecosystem and feeling that her language was represented. So she also believed that she was helping train a child that AI actually is. It created a sense of ownership and also building together along with her different community members. So this kind of work actually inspired a lot of other women in the area also to take up financial literacy curricula built in which actually helped them understand how they can set up their own bank accounts. For example, she created her own FD for the first time. So these are some of the tangible benefits of having worked with us. Of course, these are short term, but in the long term, we'd love to be able to track, how this supplemental income is helping them create pathways out of poverty as well. In the interest of time, I won't go into the second example that I have.
Maybe we can have it during the Q&A. It's shorter, but thanks so much for sharing that example. Chetna ji, similar question for you. An example from your work at Mandeshi that shows how trust networks or micro pensions reveal hidden financial needs of the entrepreneur.
Thank you. I'll give you an example of Rupali Shinde. She started a leather instrument business of musical instrument, and coming from a Dalit community, and she got an award from Niti Aayog. I mean, that was such a big thing that having a business of musical instrument coming from a breaking century-old caste barrier and century-old gender barriers also. When she got an award, she was invited to BRICS Bank in China. But it was not only like first women in her community not only going to Niti Aayog in Delhi and getting award, but then going globally also. When such things happen at a global level, what changes? One thing, when she went to the BRICS Bank, we could tell Reserve Bank of India that we are as a country, we are lagging behind women entrepreneurship. You have such a brilliant women entrepreneurs whom these global recognition they are getting it. Why can't we change the ecosystem? So then what was the result of that, which I will come? And in two lines I would say. Number one, Reserve Bank of India considered the lending to nano entrepreneurs should come under priority sector lending of the banking system. Now when it comes in that, all the banks are required to give loan to women entrepreneurs. That will make a change. And whatever we are saying, that, and of course immediately bank didn't say yes. They said no, they don't have credit score and all. So then the second thing which we got it done was that these women entrepreneurs, if they have a pre-credit score, so you prepare a score where it gives you have Udyam you have photo ID, you have digital transactions, history, all that. So she's eligible for loan, bankers can see properly. So if you make their life easy for getting an access to capital, it's not that banks are going to give, you have to de-risk the banker also. So that second we did. So with such examples, they are not just examples. They change the ecosystem, and if they change the ecosystem, I would say that we were told that, when Global Index study was done in World Economic Forum, that it will take 135 years to close the gender gap. But if women like Rupali goes to BRICS Bank, get an award, and if banks learns those lessons, I don't think we have to wait for 135 years to close the gender gap, right? Thank you.
Thank you, Chetna ji. I think very important point that change models or agents of change. I think we have to provide them a better platform to bring them there, which will also, as you rightly said, influence policies as well. Question for Reinu, which is very personal. How can CSR ecosystems meaningfully embed mental health, well-being in livelihood strategies and entrepreneurship programs as well?
वैसे तो इसमें कुछ बोलने को नहीं है, but since I'm asked to speak, I will try. And I'll just take you back to the program that we had just launched and also the first reality pitch-based series for rural women entrepreneurs. So, like I said earlier, there were 200 women, and then we went to 9 women, and this whole program has a very structured mentorship built into it. And over a period of 3 to 4 months, when we were talking to them week to week to understand their stories and all of that, the kind of challenges that they face on daily basis, you name it. It's just not gender, and Chetna ji very rightly just pointed out the caste aspect also to it. And we saw all of these, and they don't even mention, I don't know how that happens, but my experience is they don't even mention caste. If they are from the Dalit community and they face those challenges, they don't even address those, they just say those as political problems. So that's what we've seen, and we saw, and it definitely has an impact on the mental health of the person. And there is no doubt. And we've seen this even in our urban cohorts, in our climate-related programs or whatever. So we are a team of women. All our programs are designed by women and implemented by women. We know where the need is. And we design and we just integrate. It is not a good to have thing. I think it is a must if you want to increase the productivity of the women. Coming back to the Notsa, what we found was that, and I'm not going to take names, obviously, but you see them on YouTube when we release it. But there was one particular woman who has gone through so much in her life. All of them have gone through a lot in their lives, but one of them has also faced the caste challenges, and and it has an impact on them. And they don't know the word therapy. They don't know. They have zero exposure to all of that. And yet, our team is qualified and trained to just handle it at the base level. What happens when you go to the CSR with the same thing? And we say, okay, we are raising funds for this program and this and that. And the impact that they are looking at is again very tangible, which can be then counted, acha, kitne entrepreneurs, kitna paisa, kitna job generation, all of that. But we say mental health is equally important if you want the women to stay in work, if you want to increase their productivity, and there is a cost to that. But that so far we haven't succeeded in convincing the CSR, but it continues to remain an integral part of our program, and we are not letting go of that, whether we do urban cohorts or rural cohorts. And I think it is time that this conversation is happening in the country, and CSR is cognizant of these designs and how and also they will be instrumental in helping us make them integral, not just in our program, but all such programs.
Thank you so much, Reinu. Guilty as charged, but also we ourselves started a mental well-being and social well-being program for our women entrepreneurs. So we'd like to talk about it and get some insight on that. Coming to Dr. Rajeev, based on the conversations that we had in policy, support systems, etc., what are some of the policy recommendations that you would like to draw from when it comes to greater inclusivity and nano enterprises by women?
Obviously, the major thing is that, as the point has been raised, that access to credit, and though NBFIs are there which are providing credit, but then their lending rates are quite high. So it becomes very difficult for somebody to break from SHG and become an entrepreneur, because SHG provides you a net safety net. But then if you have to make more entrepreneurs, they need to be provided finances at a relatively more economical rate, which is viable for them. And at the same time, second, as I already mentioned, that they should be deviating from the traditional sectors, and in some cases wherever it is feasible, because there are certain states, there are certain regions where basic education has already been done, certain states and certain communities. They can be introduced to the newer areas in terms of, say, technology or data centers. This is another area which should be taken care of in terms of capacity building. These two come to my mind right now, I think.
Thank you so much, Doctor. We are right on time. Paramita looks very happy. Okay, we'll move to the questions, because there are some questions which are very relevant to what we have been discussing. This does not name a speaker, but it's a very interesting question, like how do family expectations and cultural perception influence women's entrepreneurial choices?
Okay, I think all of us can take this question because we have ample experience in this. पढ़ लो, कुछ बन जाओ. I mean, I'm talking of things changing. और अगर कुछ नहीं करोगी तो शादी कर देंगी. This is something that I told my niece, who's 13 years old, when she was not serious. So you can imagine the rest of the world, what is happening. And I was just telling Chetna the same thing. And so, if you again look at data, what we have seen is that there is a huge drop when women get married and they drop out of workforce, and when added to that is the first child, more dropout, and added to that is the second child, more dropout, and what is left is female labor force participation stands at anywhere between 20 to 25%. These are the revised figures. Now, this is not just because of all these challenges alone, but then there is this whole hidden cultural upbringing where the woman is the caretaker, nothing else. She's like by default the caretaker of the family, and by default it becomes also the responsibility of the family to get her married. As long as I think culturally that remains the responsibility of the woman, remains the responsibility of the family in this manner, then there is a lot of adaptive work that needs to be done to change that mindset. And no matter how many rooms we are going to discuss this in, that I feel policies are great, there are great policies, implementation, maybe there is a gap, we are trying very hard to figure that. But I think today, one thing if you would like to take back home is that making that cultural shift in each household and empowering your girls unconditionally, and that will lead to some kind of revolution. I still very strongly believe that that hasn't changed in our country.
Please, Chetna ji, I think you will have more insights to share as well.
Thank you. So, it's very interesting. As Reinu mentioned it, like, let us go much more at grassroots there. We have one lady, Nakusa Doltai. Now, the name is Nakusa, which means in Marathi it is unwanted. Unwanted with the name. And I asked Nakusa when she came to the bank, why Nakusa? She said that I am a sixth daughter, I was unwanted, and when I was born, this name was given. And she said, I want a loan to buy a property in my name. And she was doing a work of digging wells. Anyway, Monday she gave a loan, she bought the property. She had a property papers in her name. So we said, we want to change the name because it's unwanted. She said, no, I want to keep that name on the Satwara paper, that even I can do it. And when she got this property paper, her mother said, I'm proud of my daughter. So it's also like how the cultural shift happens with the parents, with the women, and the next generation. When women like Nakusa comes forward, and not only that, it's not family and all, but when she spoke in front of the RBI directors, we got her to speak in front of RBI directors to say that one of your bank, which is licensed, can change the life of these women. So bankers should know that what changes they are doing. And when Nakusa spoke in the front of RBI directors, at that time President of India, Abdul Kalam Azad was there. He just came on the stage. So what I'm trying to say is that it does not require to do huge 1,000 crores budget. It requires a proper understanding of the problem, cracking that problem, and these women have so much of aspiration. By digging well, she became an owner of the property and created a collateral for her, right?
Thank you so much. Dr. Rajeev, you also a very interesting question. When you said that, the women now are being supported by their husband, the question is, did you also observe if that started controlling the business or, making decisions on behalf of the women when it comes to financial reinvestments, and how do they share their income and revenue?
Yeah, definitely. At we can say at the metropolitan levels or the bigger cities, I think the change is happening at a relatively faster pace than before. But yes, I don't say it generically. I have come across while working on the projects also, and at a personal level also, there are some of friends who are women who are leading the business and they are taking the decisions. Yes, they are facing the difficulties, but they are very successfully, consistently continuing their efforts, and ultimately they are doing relatively better. But as we move away from the metropolitans, as we go towards, say, second tier, third tier cities or rural areas, about the question or the discussion which is happening at the forum on Nano and the micro enterprises, at that level, definitely, I think there is a lot needs to be done.
Thanks so much, Dr. Rajeev. I have one question here for Anmol as well. So you spoke about digital confidence and foundational skills, and of course they are as important as capital. Have you seen in your work successful ways to build this early on? Not when the women is there, but maybe get into colleges, institutions where you can build it from there, so that once the women become enterprise owners or Nano entrepreneurship owners, how is it that they can, make sure that that cycle of learning still keeps going on?
Great question. I think because by virtue of the people we work with, largely nano entrepreneurs, 60% of the people we work with are women. And typically the age groups that they fall in would be in the 18 to 35 category for the most part. So it's young people with relatively varying levels of digital skills and literacy. We are embedding a learning pathway into the work that they're doing and learning from the perspective of digital skills, but also from the perspective of life skills. And the third portion is creating opportunities where learning and earning go hand in hand. So the first one is where if the work that you're doing is digital work, within that can we embed some learning curricula such as financial literacy, how to open a bank account, what is the value addition of having an FD as opposed to putting your money in the market, how to use ATM, how to use UPI, things like that. The second is on their off time, when they're not using the app, can they access learning curricula that helps them understand how to do different types and layers of digital work. So digital work evolves as you go from low complexity to high complexity. So moving from something like a voice recording or a transcription to something like segmentation, which is to look at multiple disparate recordings, or even something which we call an LLM evaluation, which is essentially just looking at the output that an AI model has given you and seeing if it makes sense to you contextually in your regional Indic language. So creating that pathway for them. The third is life skills. So what are the other things that we can bridge the information asymmetry for, such as access to social protection programs, how to create a PAN card. And we have actually seen this virtuous cycle where when women start earning a sustained amount of income through Karya, we have facilitated PAN cards for them, and that is a segue or a foot in the door to their entry into the formal economy. And we also had this really interesting RCT that we did in collaboration with JPAL, wherein we tried to assess what is the impact of this kind of flexible digital work on female labor force participation or entry into the formal economy. And we're seeing some really promising results about how this acts as a foot in the door technique in terms of creating acceptability around women earning money within the household. So flexibility is key here. And that increases willingness for them to do more flexible work going forward, but also openness to actually leaving their households and entering the formal market as well. I hope that answers the question in some sense.
Thank you so much, Anmol. We are out of time. Yeah, thanks, Paramita. So thank you so much, all of you, for your insights and inputs. I think, when I'm sitting here and I come from a corporate myself, I could literally, now when I made points, I could literally see that when you're building a program for Nano enterprises, but run by women, what is it that you need to include? Everything that you said, an integrated approach is what is required. So thank you so much. Can you give a round of applause for all the speakers? There are 5 key takeaways that I would like to share, and I'm sure you have made your own notes. One is, of course, what I said about an integrated approach from the very beginning of when you start developing a program on women entrepreneurship. We need more women on the table. We have today, and I'm sure that these will also change at the policy level as well. Last mile support is something that is very important because that's where I think a lot of dropouts happen. A lot of women struggle to sustain their businesses. Multi-stakeholder programs and collaborations is important. We can't deny that. And new models of enterprises and programs is required, like how Dr. Rajeev mentioned that when we do programs for women on entrepreneurship building, we focus on very few, traditional mediums. One is, of course, stitching, beauty care, home shares, etc., etc. So what are these non-traditional skills or training that you can provide to women who can then, build larger enterprises depending on the market trend and demand. So these are my 5 takeaways. Thank you so much for your attention in your time.